I'm Olek Novak, this is Chasing Cars, and this spicy Spaniard right next to me is the Cupra Tavascan. Now, it is the second EV from the brand to launch locally in Australia. Now, we've already done 2 videos about it because we got to check it out in the flesh in Australia a few months ago. Then we got to drive it for the first time in Europe very recently. But today is all about driving it for the first time on local roads right here in Australia. Now, there are only 2 models of these in Australia at the moment. This is one of them, so it's very exciting to finally get a taste of what this is like on Aussie roads, because if you've watched our last video, we were quite big fans of it based on our first initial European launch drive. So today is all about getting a taste of it on Aussie roads and seeing if the Tesla Model Y should be worried. Before we do all of that, make sure to hit like, subscribe, hit that notification bell below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
Now, if you haven't already, make sure to check out our other 2 videos on the Tavascan. But a quick recap before we check out the interior and go for a drive, because this vehicle, it's based on Volkswagen Group's MEB platform. So that means it's a sibling under the skin to vehicles like the Audi Q4 e-tron, the Skoda Enyaq, and the Volkswagen ID4. But being a Cupra, wearing the Cupra badge, means that it promises something a bit more dynamic and emotive in terms of its design and also its driving experience. So we'll be a judge of the driving experience as much as we can shortly. But in terms of the design, what do you think? It certainly has a bit of road presence about it, a bit of a cool design, obviously subjective, but let us know in the comments section down below if you think that is worthy of the Cupra badge in terms of the design and the look of this vehicle. Now, it is built in China like so many new EVs in Australia, and it's coming here very soon with a 2-grade lineup. So there's going to be an entry-level endurance model and also a VZ. So let's check out everything else you need to know about it before we hop inside. Both the entry-grade front-drive endurance and the top-spec dual-motor all-wheel drive VZ feature a 77 kilowatt-hour usable battery. The endurance, which runs on 19-inch alloys, has a quoted WLTP range of 534 kilometers and total outputs of 210 kilowatts and 545 newton meters, while the VZ, which runs on 21-inch alloys, has a quoted WLTP range of 499 kilometers and total outputs of 250 kilowatts and 545 newton meters, enough for a claimed 0 to 100 kilometer an hour sprint of 5.5 seconds. It's important to note that while our dual motor prototype test car looked, felt, smelt, and drove like a final production car, there were some spec nuances, which meant it didn't match up exactly with final Aussie specifications. Now, pricing hasn't yet been confirmed for the Tavascan in Australia either, but the brand has said the endurance will start in the 60s and the VZ in the 70s, with both variants to fall below the luxury car tax threshold in Australia and qualify for fringe benefits tax exemptions. Head to our written review and the Chasing Cars website for more details on the spec, and stay tuned for further updates too. I've really wanted to get inside the Cupra Tavascan cabin ever since I saw some of those initial reviews that were published to Chasing Cars, because I've heard a lot of different words used to describe it. Some of those words have included words like cyberpunk, reptilian, skeletal, not only that, but Batman-esque, gothic, and I think whether those words are good or not, I think the fact that they're being used to describe it shows that it is an interesting interior. There's a bit of design presence about it, and I definitely agree with that, because it's kind of like the antithesis to a Tesla Model Y interior. I believe we mentioned that in our previous video. And not to say that one is better or the other, but the Cupra interior, it's doing something really interesting. And for my taste, I actually quite like it, because it is a cool interior to my subjective taste. I love how it wraps around you. This spine that's over here, which is, I've heard some people describe it as a bit reptilian in terms of the textures. It's really cool. It's just like there's interesting angles, interesting shapes. It's been designed, and I like that about the vehicle. Not only that, there's a lot of cool textures throughout the cabin and a lot of different patterns. Triangles, obviously a big theme given the fact that it is a Cupra, but everything you touch has a different kind of feel to it and kind of makes it feel a bit more, I don't know, alive maybe. Even all the kind of less exciting, harder kind of plastics feel pretty good, and they just have an interesting kind of feel to them. Not only that, but it also feels really solid and well built, which is a good thing. You've got a steering wheel, it's lovely to behold. You've still got those touch capacitive buttons that I've kind of pressed a few times accidentally on the drive, but overall it's fine. A nice little screen in front of you, does the job, don't really need anything more. This big screen above this kind of key design spine element over here that does a good job. I haven't had much time to interact with it. It seems pretty fast. The graphics seem pretty good, really clear. Obviously, a lot of the functionality is integrated. At least the climate is permanently displayed at the bottom. I do like that it is at least angled toward the driver. Being the fact that it's a Cupra, it has to be. It's focused around the driver. Don't have to lean forward that much to engage with it, so that's good. got a wireless charger over there, a bit of open space over here, cup holders, and a deep storage section over here. So overall, the cabin, I think it's doing something interesting. It's doing something different. It stands out. For that, I give it a tick. Whether it's to your taste or not, I'll let you decide. Let us know in the comments. This is a Cupra, so we need to go for a drive because that's what it's all about. But let's quickly check out the rear seats. In terms of ambience in the rear of the Tavascan, it's pretty decent. So for me, 6 foot space is pretty good. So leg room and knee room, that's decent. The seats are also pretty comfy too. Headroom, look, that's probably just okay for me. Obviously, sloping coupe SUV styling, so tall rear seat, tall passengers in the rear seat, probably a consideration, but look, I get away with it at 183 centimeters. You've got this glass roof as well, which might eat into it as well, but I guess that helps with making sure the cabin isn't too cocooned, isn't too dark here in the back. I guess one thing to note, some scratchy plastics over here. I guess Cupra, maybe they can get away with it because it's focused on the driver, but at the same time, it's an SUV, so that's just something to note. But otherwise, the ambience in the back isn't too bad over here. You've got some of the nice themes and patterns from the front that continue. Seats, like I mentioned, are pretty comfy. You've got a fold-down center armrest with 2 cup holders over here, some mat pockets either side. You've got air conditioning, heated seats over here, 2 USB-C connections. So in the rear, it's not too bad. The boot as well, 540 litres, so it's a pretty decent size as well. But let's see how the Cupra Tavascan drives. So now let's see first impressions on Aussie roads. And important to note that while this doesn't match an exact Aussie spec, the car that we are in now, that we are in a dual motor variant. Of course, power is still biased toward the rear. And we are on the biggest wheels here, the 21-inch wheels as well. So that's an important thing to note too. Tyres won't match the exact Aussie specs, however. So I guess the first thing to note is that power delivery, this thing does not feel short on power. It feels pretty potent. It's got some very decent shove, so it does not feel underpowered at all. And it feels extremely responsive to your inputs with the accelerator pedal. In terms of the steering does feel quite good. It feels very direct, very progressive, feels extremely accurate and quite engaging. So definitely as far as Cupras go, it feels like a appropriate Cupra steering setup. Quite an engaging vehicle to take around a set of bends. Yeah, it's very quick and direct, the steering, so that feels quite good. In terms of the overall ride and handling balance, now the ride, we're on the lowest profile tires here and the ride feels quite well sorted. It's quite comfortable. There's quite a lot of bumps on this windy B road that we're on, and overall I think the Tavascan's doing a really decent job at soaking the bumps up. They don't feel too harsh in terms of what's being transmitted into the cabin, and the body control feels really quite well sorted. Grip feels and road holding feels quite good. So it's definitely not an uninspiring ride. And there's a decent level of confidence that you get behind the wheel of the Tavascan, which, like I mentioned, the power delivery feels quite potent. It always feels like you've got enough power there. It's quite easy to modulate. And yeah, it does feel quite enjoyable around a set of bends, and it holds on really nicely. Feels like a really decent, confidence-inspiring chassis that's beneath you, that's doing a decent job communicating what the car is doing. Again, everything feels quite good I've mentioned earlier that the cabin feels quite solidly built, and I think as far as a driver-focused car goes, the steering wheel is really nice in the hand. I like the fact that the infotainment is the angle toward the driver. That's quite good too. I do keep bumping the touch controls here on the steering wheel, so that's maybe a tad annoying, but overall it seems pretty good. You've got all the info you need in front of you with that small digital instrument cluster. So overall, as far as adding to the drive experience, it feels quite focused. It's good in that regard. Then with the brakes, you've got the paddles here on the steering wheel that you can use to switch between the different levels of regenerative braking to make it to your taste in terms of how strong you want it. So currently we are in the maximum amount, and that adds a nice bit of engagement to the drive. You can also cycle through the different drive modes, and it's great because you've got the buttons here on the steering wheel to do that, to go through between performance mode, Cupra mode, individual settings, traction mode, range mode, comfort mode. Now I'd like to spend a bit more time with the vehicle to be able to get a sense of the nuances of the feel between the different modes. Haven't quite had the time to do that today, but overall I've kind of mainly been switching between comfort, performance and Cupra modes. And look, and the vehicle's been comfortable in all those scenarios. So again, I guess, that initial impression is that, it feels potent. Definitely got enough poke from its 250 kilowatts in this model that we are in, the dual motor, and 545 Newton meters of torque. So you can definitely feel that it's got decent power, decent torque. The refinement overall is good. It feels like quite a quiet, well-insulated cabin. Maybe a tiny bit of road noise now, but overall it feels quite decent, is my initial impression at least. In terms of safety, I haven't had too much time to test out the elements like adaptive cruise control and such, but overall the safety systems haven't been too intrusive in the drive experience that I've had today. They seem to have been pretty well calibrated. Perhaps the brakes could be a bit more potent, or maybe that just could be me in terms of just getting used to maybe expecting a bit more grabbiness, but there's maybe just a nuance there in terms of there's a bit of travel there to really get them going. But that's an initial impression. Perhaps they could be a bit stronger, but overall that doesn't detract from the drive experience too much. All right, so let's test out the acceleration again. Yeah, we're on public roads, so we're not pushing it too hard, but it feels good. So overall, I think, my initial impressions of the Cupra Tavascan are that it feels, at least on this short launch drive, it feels befitting of the Cupra badge. It feels like there's decent engagement to the drive. It feels quite confidence-inspiring and capable. And for an electric vehicle, it feels like the handling seems like it's there, the body control, the steering. It feels quite nice in the hand, quite good to drive, quite confidence-inspiring. And I think befitting of the Cupra badge as its premier top-spec electric vehicle. So I think it bodes well for the brand. It definitely feels good on this initial launch drive on Aussie roads. We thought it was good when we drove it in Europe. Still think it's good now. So the real test is going to be when we can get it into the garage to just put it through its paces a bit more. But at least I'm liking what I'm feeling so far. I think it's interesting. It looks cool. It's got a cool interior. It seems to, as a medium-sized, performance-focused EV, it seems to offer something different in its class in terms of a look that isn't like the other vehicles, and it feels like the drive experience has a bit of spice to it and kind of supports the way it's been designed. So that's my initial impression. We'll see how that continues once we can spend more time with it in exact Aussie specs, in more varied road kind of scenarios, and also for a bit more time in the different grades that will be available in Australia. But so far, it feels like quite a capable and fun vehicle to take around these bends that we're doing today. So we'll see how it eventuates once it launches in Australia. Those are some of our initial thoughts and impressions of the Cupra Tavascan. Now, obviously, it was a relatively short drive today, so we're going to reserve final judgment until we can bring this thing into the Chasing Cars garage to drive it for a longer period of time to give a more final assessment of its driving dynamics. Not only that, but to do our proper range and charging tests. Obviously, it focuses on dynamics, but being an electric vehicle, efficiency is important. So we look forward to doing that as this vehicle rolls out over the coming months. Stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let us know what you have to think about the Cupra Tavascan. Do you think it looks good? Which grade do you reckon might be the most compelling? Would you go for this? Would you go for a competitor? Which competitor would you go for? And should the Tesla Model Y be worried about the Cupra Tavascan? We look forward to seeing it roll out in Australia over the coming months. In the meantime, let us know your thoughts. While you're there, make sure to hit like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, give us a follow on TikTok and Instagram too. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.